Chapter 6. Stop explaining yourself. One of the most common habits of people who struggle with disrespect is over-explaining themselves. They explain their choices. They explain their boundaries. They explain their opinions. They explain their decisions. They explain their feelings. They explain themselves so much that they begin sounding as though they are asking for permission to live their own lives. And without realizing it, they weaken their position. This is a difficult truth for many people to accept, because most people believe that if they explain themselves enough, everyone will understand. They believe that if they provide enough reasons, enough details, and enough justification, people will finally approve. But life does not work that way. Some people will understand you, some people will not. Some people will respect your decisions, some people will disagree, some people will support you. Some people will criticize you. No amount of explaining can completely control how people respond. The desire to explain everything often comes from a deeper place. It comes from the desire to be accepted, the desire to avoid conflict, the desire to avoid criticism, the desire to avoid disappointing others. And because of these fears, people begin turning every decision into a courtroom trial. They gather evidence, present arguments, offer explanations, defend themselves repeatedly, all in an attempt to gain approval. But confident people understand something important. Not every decision requires a defense. Not every boundary requires a lengthy explanation. Not every choice requires public approval. Sometimes a decision is simply a decision, and that is enough. Imagine someone asks you to do something you do not want to do. Many people respond like this: "I'm sorry, but I can't because I'm really busy. And I have a lot going on right now, and I already have plans, and maybe another time, and I hope you understand." Notice what is happening. The person is not simply communicating, they are seeking permission. They are trying to make their decision acceptable. They are trying to prevent disappointment. They are trying to avoid judgment. But the more they explain, the more negotiable their decision appears. Now compare that with a different response. "I won't be able to do that." Simple, respectful, clear. No hostility, no unnecessary details. No invitation for endless debate. Just certainty. Certainty is powerful, because certainty communicates self-trust. It communicates confidence. It communicates that you believe your decision is valid. And when you believe your decision is valid, others are more likely to respect it. One reason over-explaining weakens your position is because it signals doubt. Imagine two people making the same decision. The first person says, "I think maybe this might be the best choice, but I'm not entirely sure, and maybe I'm wrong, and perhaps there's another option." The second person says, "After careful consideration, this is the decision I've made." Who sounds more confident? Who sounds more trustworthy? Who sounds more likely to be respected? The answer is obvious. People are naturally influenced by certainty, not arrogance, not stubbornness, certainty. There is a difference. Arrogance refuses to learn. Certainty is simply confidence in one's decision. Arrogance rejects wisdom. Certainty applies wisdom and moves forward. Arrogance believes it knows everything. Certainty understands enough to act. Many people delay their lives because they are constantly seeking permission. Permission to pursue their goals. Permission to set boundaries. Permission to speak honestly. Permission to prioritize themselves. Permission to say no. Permission to protect their peace. But confidence grows when you stop waiting for permission. Confidence grows when you begin trusting your own judgment. Not perfectly, not blindly, but consistently. Every healthy decision strengthens self-trust. Every boundary strengthens self-respect. Every act of courage strengthens confidence. And confidence reduces the need for endless explanations. Think about the people you admire most, the people who command respect, the people who seem grounded and secure. Do they spend their lives explaining every decision? Usually not. They communicate clearly. They communicate respectfully. Then they move forward. Because they understand a powerful truth. A decision loses strength when it is constantly defended. This does not mean refusing to explain when explanation is appropriate. There are times when explanation is helpful. There are times when communication is necessary. There are times when clarity improves relationships. Wise people know the difference. The issue is not explanation itself. The issue is excessive explanation. The issue is explaining from insecurity. The issue is explaining because you are afraid people will not approve. When fear drives communication, confidence disappears. When confidence drives communication, clarity emerges. This principle becomes especially important when dealing with rude people. Rude people often challenge your boundaries, challenge your decisions, challenge your confidence, challenge your self-respect. Why? Because they are testing your certainty. They are looking for hesitation, looking for weakness, looking for opportunities to push further. The moment you begin over-explaining, many of them see an opening. The conversation shifts from your decision to their negotiation, from your boundary to their argument, from your certainty to their persuasion. That is why clear communication matters. A respectful no is still no. A healthy boundary remains a boundary. A wise decision remains a wise decision. And not every disagreement requires a debate. One of the most powerful communication habits you can develop is learning to let your yes be yes and your no be no. Simple, clear, consistent. Many people say yes when they mean no, then become resentful later. Many people say maybe when they have already decided no, then become frustrated when others keep asking. Many people communicate uncertainty because they fear disappointing people. But unclear communication creates confusion. And confusion often creates more conflict than honesty ever would. People respect clarity, even when they dislike the answer. Think about it. A clear no may disappoint someone temporarily, but a dishonest yes often creates problems for everyone. Clarity saves time. Clarity protects peace. Clarity builds trust. When people know your words mean something, they take you seriously. When your yes truly means yes, people trust you. When your no truly means no, people respect you. Consistency creates credibility, and credibility creates influence. One reason many people struggle with certainty is because they fear making mistakes. They fear choosing incorrectly. They fear being judged. They fear criticism. So they remain trapped in indecision, constantly questioning themselves, constantly seeking reassurance, constantly asking others what they should do. But confidence is not built by avoiding mistakes. Confidence is built by making decisions and learning from them. Nobody becomes confident by waiting forever. Nobody becomes strong by avoiding responsibility. Nobody develops self-trust by letting others make every decision. Confidence grows through action. Confidence grows through experience. Confidence grows through ownership. Even when mistakes happen, especially when mistakes happen. Because every lesson learned strengthens wisdom, and wisdom strengthens certainty. Another reason confident people communicate differently is because they understand that disagreement is normal. Not everyone will agree with you. Not everyone will understand you. Not everyone will support your choices. And that is okay. Trying to gain universal approval is exhausting. Trying to avoid all criticism is impossible. Trying to make everyone happy is a never-ending task. Eventually, you must decide whose opinion matters most. And the answer should not always be the crowd. It should be your values, your principles, your integrity, your conscience. When your decisions align with these things, you can stand firm even when others disagree. That firmness commands respect, not because everyone agrees, but because people recognize conviction. They recognize self-trust. They recognize confidence, and confidence is difficult to ignore. As you continue your journey toward becoming someone rude people respect, remember this: you do not need to justify your existence. You do not need to defend every decision. You do not need to explain every boundary. You do not need permission to protect your peace. Communicate clearly, communicate respectfully, communicate confidently. Then move forward. Trust yourself, trust your values, trust your judgment, and allow your actions to speak louder than endless explanations. Because true confidence is not found in convincing everyone. True confidence is found in standing firm when everyone is not convinced. Key lesson: people respect those who stand by their decisions. When your yes is truly yes and your no is truly no, people learn that your words carry weight. Stop seeking permission to make healthy decisions. Stop over-explaining your boundaries. Speak with clarity, stand with confidence, and let your consistency communicate your strength. Chapter 7. Use silence as a weapon. One of the greatest signs of maturity is learning that not everything deserves a response. Not every insult, not every accusation, not every criticism, not every challenge, not every rude comment. Yet many people spend their lives reacting to everything. Someone says something offensive, they react. Someone criticizes them unfairly, they react. Someone insults them online, they react. Someone spreads gossip, they react. Someone tries to provoke them, they react. And before long, their life becomes a series of emotional battles, one conflict after another, one argument after another, one frustration after another. They are constantly defending themselves, constantly explaining themselves, constantly fighting battles they never needed to fight. The problem is not that they are weak. The problem is that they have not yet learned the power of silence. Silence is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength. Many people see silence as weakness. They believe silence means surrender. They believe silence means fear. They believe silence means losing. But strategic silence is none of those things. Strategic silence is a choice, a deliberate choice, a wise choice, a powerful choice. Because silence often communicates something words cannot. It communicates self-control. It communicates confidence. It communicates emotional maturity. It communicates that you are not easily manipulated, and that message is powerful. Most rude people expect a reaction. They expect anger. They expect outrage. They expect defensiveness. They expect you to jump into the fight. Why? Because your reaction feeds their behavior. Your reaction gives them attention. Your reaction gives them influence. Your reaction gives them power. Think about a fire. A fire survives because it is fed. Without fuel, it eventually dies. Many arguments work the same way. They survive because someone keeps feeding them. Someone keeps responding. Someone keeps reacting. Someone keeps participating. Remove the fuel, and many conflicts lose their strength. This is why silence can be so effective. It removes the fuel. Imagine someone insults you in front of others. They expect you to become angry. They expect you to defend yourself immediately. They expect an emotional explosion. Instead, you remain calm. You say nothing. You smile slightly. You continue with your day. Suddenly, the situation changes. The power shifts because the reaction they wanted never arrived. The battle they prepared for never happened. The attention they wanted never came. And without realizing it, they have exposed themselves. This is one of the hidden powers of silence. Silence often exposes foolishness. When two people are arguing, it can be difficult to determine who is acting foolishly. But when one person remains calm while the other continues attacking, the difference becomes obvious. The louder the foolish person becomes, the more visible their foolishness becomes. The calmer the wise person remains, the stronger they appear. This does not mean silence is always the answer. Sometimes speaking up is necessary. Sometimes boundaries must be enforced. Sometimes truth must be spoken. Sometimes injustice must be confronted. Wisdom is knowing the difference. The goal is not permanent silence. The goal is strategic silence. The goal is learning when speaking helps and when speaking hurts. Many people speak because they feel uncomfortable with silence. They believe every accusation requires a defense. Every insult requires a comeback. Every criticism requires a response. But that belief creates exhaustion. Imagine carrying a backpack filled with rocks. Every insult becomes a rock. Every criticism becomes a rock. Every negative opinion becomes a rock. Eventually, the weight becomes unbearable. Yet much of that weight is unnecessary. You do not have to carry every opinion. You do not have to answer every critic. You do not have to attend every argument you are invited to. Read that again. You do not have to attend every argument you are invited to. That single lesson can change your life. Because some battles are designed to distract you. Some arguments are designed to drain you. Some conflicts are designed to provoke you. And every moment spent fighting pointless battles is a moment stolen from your purpose. Wise people understand this. That is why they choose their battles carefully. They ask important questions. Is this worth my energy? Is this worth my peace? Is this worth my attention? Will responding improve the situation, or will it simply create more drama? These questions protect them from unnecessary conflict. One reason silence is so powerful is because it demonstrates confidence. Insecure people often feel compelled to prove themselves, to defend themselves, to justify themselves, to convince everyone. But confident people understand something important. Not everyone needs an explanation. Not everyone deserves access to your thoughts. Not everyone deserves your emotional investment. Sometimes silence says, I know who I am. Sometimes silence says, I do not need your approval. Sometimes silence says, I refuse to lower myself to this level. And those messages often carry more weight than words. Think about a lion. A lion does not spend its day responding to every barking dog. The lion continues moving forward, focused, calm, purposeful. Not because the noise does not exist, but because the lion understands its identity. Likewise, when you understand your value, you stop feeling obligated to respond to every criticism. You stop chasing every rumor. You stop correcting every misunderstanding. You stop fighting every battle. Because your focus shifts from proving yourself to improving yourself. That shift is life-changing. Another powerful aspect of silence is that it creates space. Space to think, space to observe, space to understand. People often reveal themselves when given enough silence. The rude person reveals their character. The manipulator reveals their intentions. The dishonest person reveals their inconsistencies. The arrogant person reveals their insecurity. Many people talk themselves into exposure. All you have to do is remain patient, remain observant, remain calm. Silence gives wisdom room to work. It allows emotions to settle. It allows truth to emerge. It allows perspective to return. This is why some of the strongest people are not the loudest. They understand that power is not always found in speaking. Sometimes power is found in restraint. Sometimes power is found in patience. Sometimes power is found in walking away. And walking away is a skill many people never master. Why? Because walking away feels like losing. But often, walking away is winning. Walking away from pointless arguments is winning. Walking away from toxic conversations is winning. Walking away from unnecessary drama is winning. Walking away from people committed to misunderstanding you is winning. Because victory is not always defeating someone. Sometimes victory is protecting your peace. Sometimes victory is protecting your focus. Sometimes victory is protecting your future. Imagine spending an hour arguing with a fool. At the end of the hour, what have you gained? Usually very little. But what have you lost? Time, energy, focus, peace. The cost is often far greater than the reward. Wise people recognize this early. They understand that attention is one of life's most valuable resources, and they refuse to waste it carelessly. As you continue learning how to earn respect from rude people, remember this: your attention is valuable. Your peace is valuable. Your energy is valuable. Do not hand them out freely. Do not spend them on every conflict. Do not waste them on every insult. Protect them, guard them, invest them wisely. Because people who cannot control your attention cannot easily control you. And people who cannot control you eventually lose interest in manipulating you. The strongest response is not always a response. The strongest move is not always a move. The strongest statement is not always spoken. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is remain silent. Remain calm, remain focused, and continue moving forward. Key lesson: not every challenge deserves your attention. Some battles are worth fighting. Many are not. Learn the difference, because every unnecessary argument steals something valuable from your life. And every time you choose wisdom over reaction, silence over foolishness, and peace over pointless conflict, you become stronger than the person trying to provoke you. Chapter 8. Make people experience consequences. One of the greatest misunderstandings about respect is the belief that people will automatically change simply because you ask them to. Many people spend years explaining, years warning, years forgiving, years giving second chances, years hoping, years believing that one more conversation will finally solve the problem. Yet nothing changes. The disrespect continues, the manipulation continues, the insults continue, the toxic behavior continues, and eventually they become frustrated. They wonder, why don't they listen? Why don't they change? Why does this keep happening? The answer is often simple: because there are no consequences. Human behavior follows patterns. What is rewarded tends to continue. What is tolerated tends to continue. What is permitted tends to continue. And what faces no consequences often becomes a habit. This is why accountability is essential. Without accountability, respect begins to disappear. Without accountability, boundaries lose meaning. Without accountability, rude people learn that their behavior costs them nothing. Imagine a child touching a hot stove. The pain creates a consequence. The consequence teaches a lesson. The lesson changes behavior. Life works the same way. People learn through consequences. Not merely through words, not merely through warnings, but through experiences. This is why repeated tolerance often encourages disrespect. Every time someone mistreats you and experiences no consequence, they receive a message. The message says, this behavior is acceptable. This behavior works. This behavior can continue. You may never speak those words, but your actions communicate them, and actions are often louder than words. Many people unknowingly train others to disrespect them, not because they deserve disrespect, not because they are weak, but because they consistently tolerate what should not be tolerated. Someone lies repeatedly, they stay. Someone insults them repeatedly, they stay. Someone manipulates them repeatedly, they stay. Someone violates their boundaries repeatedly, they stay. Again and again, year after year, the behavior continues because the cost remains low or non-existent. Now understand something important. Consequences are not revenge. Consequences are not punishment. Consequences are not hatred. Consequences are information. Consequences teach people what is acceptable and what is not. A healthy consequence simply communicates, if this behavior continues, access to me changes. That is not cruelty. That is self-respect. One of the most powerful consequences you can enforce is limiting access. Many people believe access to their life should be automatic, available to everyone, regardless of behavior, regardless of character, regardless of respect. But wise people understand something different. Access is earned. Trust is earned. Influence is earned. Proximity is earned. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your time. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your energy. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your attention. And certainly not everyone deserves unlimited access to your peace. When someone consistently treats you with disrespect, one of the healthiest responses is reducing their access to your life. Not out of bitterness, not out of revenge, but out of wisdom. You spend less time with them, share less with them, depend less on them, engage less with them. Gradually, their influence over your life decreases. And often this is the consequence that gets their attention, because many people only appreciate something after they begin losing access to it. One reason people struggle with consequences is guilt. They feel guilty creating distance, guilty saying no, guilty enforcing boundaries, guilty protecting themselves. But ask yourself this question: why do you feel guilty protecting your peace? Why do you feel guilty protecting your dignity? Why do you feel guilty protecting your emotional health? You would not feel guilty locking your front door at night. You would not feel guilty protecting your family. You would not feel guilty securing something valuable. Your peace is valuable. Your emotional well-being is valuable. Your future is valuable. Protecting them is not selfish. It is responsible. Another difficult lesson in life is recognizing toxic influences. Not everyone who enters your life deserves a permanent place in it. Some people help you grow. Some people encourage your purpose. Some people strengthen your confidence. Some people inspire your best qualities, but others do the opposite. They drain your energy, destroy your confidence, create unnecessary drama, spread negativity, encourage unhealthy behavior, attack your self-worth, and slowly poison your peace. These people are often referred to as toxic influences. The word toxic is overused today, but genuinely toxic people do exist. Not because they are imperfect. Everyone is imperfect. Not because they make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. But because their behavior consistently damages the well-being of those around them. And despite repeated opportunities to change, they refuse. One of the most courageous things you will ever do is remove toxic influences from your life. Not because it is easy, because it is often incredibly difficult. Especially when history is involved, especially when emotions are involved, especially when loyalty is involved. But keeping harmful people close simply because they have been around a long time is not wisdom. A person can be familiar and still be harmful. A person can be loved and still be unhealthy. A person can be important and still be destructive. Maturity is recognizing the difference. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is create distance. Distance creates clarity. Distance creates perspective. Distance creates peace. And sometimes distance reveals truths you could never see while standing in the middle of the chaos. Many people fear walking away because they interpret it as failure. They think, if I walk away, I lose. If I leave, they win. If I create distance, I have failed. But that perspective is often backwards. Walking away from disrespect is not failure. Walking away from abuse is not failure. Walking away from manipulation is not failure. Walking away from toxicity is wisdom. It takes courage to leave what is familiar. It takes courage to choose yourself. It takes courage to prioritize peace over attachment. And courage is one of the foundations of self-respect. There comes a moment in every person's life when they must decide what they are willing to tolerate. That decision shapes their future. Because what you tolerate determines the quality of your relationships. The quality of your relationships influences the quality of your life. If you tolerate constant disrespect, your life becomes filled with disrespect. If you tolerate manipulation, your life becomes filled with manipulation. If you tolerate toxicity, your life becomes filled with toxicity. But when you raise your standards, something changes. People begin adjusting. Some people improve. Some people respect the new boundaries. Some people rise to the standard. And those who refuse often remove themselves. Either outcome benefits you, because your life becomes healthier, stronger, more peaceful. One truth many people discover too late is this: not everyone is meant to accompany you into your future. Some relationships are seasonal. Some relationships are temporary. Some relationships exist to teach lessons, and some relationships eventually reach their natural conclusion. Accepting this truth requires wisdom. Holding on to every relationship, regardless of its impact, requires fear, and fear rarely leads to peace. The people who respect themselves understand something powerful. They are willing to walk away when necessary, not impulsively, not emotionally, not recklessly, but deliberately. After reflection, after communication, after giving opportunities for change. When change never comes, they choose themselves, and that decision transforms their lives. Because self-respect grows every time you honor your own boundaries. Self-respect grows every time you refuse to tolerate what destroys your peace. Self-respect grows every time you protect your emotional well-being, and self-respect changes how people treat you. The moment people realize there are consequences for disrespect, many begin behaving differently. Not all, but many. Because accountability creates awareness. Awareness creates change, and change creates respect. As you continue your journey, remember this: you cannot control other people's behavior. You cannot force people to change. You cannot make someone respect you, but you can control your response. You can control your boundaries. You can control your standards. You can control who receives access to your life, and those choices shape everything. Never be afraid to enforce consequences. Never be afraid to protect your peace. Never be afraid to create distance when necessary. Never be afraid to walk away from what consistently dishonors your value, because every healthy consequence sends a powerful message. I respect myself enough not to tolerate this. And that message is impossible to ignore. Key lesson: people rarely change when there are no consequences. Respect follows accountability. When disrespect costs nothing, it often continues. But when healthy consequences are consistently enforced, people learn where your boundaries are. And even when they refuse to change, your willingness to protect your peace ensures that you do not remain trapped in cycles of disrespect. Chapter 9: Develop unbreakable self-respect. At the heart of every respectful relationship is one essential ingredient: self-respect. Not confidence, not charisma, not popularity, not success. Self-respect. Because before the world decides how to treat you, you have already taught the world what you believe about yourself. This is one of the most powerful truths you will ever learn. The relationship you have with yourself becomes the blueprint for every other relationship in your life. If you respect yourself, people notice. If you value yourself, people notice. If you honor your boundaries, people notice. And if you constantly abandon yourself, people notice that too. The world is always watching your example. Not merely listening to your words, watching your actions, watching your standards, watching what you tolerate, watching what you accept, watching what you refuse. That is why respect begins from within. Many people spend years chasing external respect while neglecting internal respect. They want others to believe in them, but they do not believe in themselves. They want others to value them, but they do not value themselves. They want others to honor their boundaries, but they ignore their own boundaries. This creates a painful contradiction, because people often struggle to receive from others what they refuse to give themselves. If you constantly disrespect yourself, it becomes difficult to convince others to do differently. Self-respect is not something people hand to you. It is something you build, day by day, choice by choice, decision by decision, and every decision either strengthens it or weakens it. Many people think self-respect is a feeling. It is not. Self-respect is a practice, a daily practice, a way of living, a way of thinking, a way of treating yourself. It is built every time you keep a promise to yourself, every time you honor your values, every time you choose integrity over convenience, every time you protect your peace, every time you refuse to betray your principles. These small decisions accumulate, and over time they create something powerful. Trust in yourself. Think about it. How can you respect someone whose promises mean nothing? Someone who constantly says one thing and does another? Someone who repeatedly abandons their commitments? Respect requires trust. The same is true internally. Every promise you break to yourself weakens self-trust. Every commitment you honor strengthens self-trust, and self-trust becomes self-respect. This is why daily habits matter so much. Many people want confidence, but confidence is often the result of consistent behavior. Confidence grows when you prove to yourself that you can be trusted. Keeping your word, following through, showing discipline, practicing consistency. These things seem small, but they build something extraordinary. They build character, and character is the foundation of lasting confidence. Consider the person who repeatedly tells themselves, "I'll start tomorrow. I'll change later. I'll do it eventually." Days become weeks, weeks become months, months become years. The promise is never fulfilled. Eventually, the mind learns something dangerous. It learns not to trust itself. Every broken promise becomes evidence. Evidence that words mean little. Evidence that intentions mean little. Evidence that commitment is weak. Now consider the opposite person. The person who follows through, not perfectly, but consistently. The person who keeps showing up, keeps trying, keeps improving, keeps honoring their commitments. Over time, they develop confidence, not because they are special, not because they are gifted, but because they have proven themselves trustworthy, and trust creates respect, including self-respect. Another critical aspect of self-respect is learning to refuse what destroys your dignity. This sounds obvious, yet countless people struggle with it. They tolerate disrespectful friendships, disrespectful relationships, disrespectful workplaces, disrespectful environments, not because they enjoy them, but because they fear the alternative. Fear loneliness, fear rejection, fear uncertainty, fear change. And so they remain where their dignity is slowly being eroded, day after day, year after year. The tragedy is that every act of tolerated disrespect sends a message to yourself. The message says, my feelings don't matter, my peace doesn't matter, my dignity doesn't matter. And when that message is repeated often enough, it begins shaping your identity. This is why refusing disrespect is so important. Not because it changes the other person, but because it protects you. Every healthy boundary protects your dignity. Every act of self-respect strengthens your identity. Every courageous decision reinforces your value. You begin teaching yourself a different lesson, a healthier lesson, a stronger lesson. The lesson that says, I matter. My well-being matters. My peace matters. My future matters. That lesson transforms lives. One reason self-respect is so powerful is because it affects every relationship. Think about the people who consistently attract healthy relationships, healthy friendships, healthy partnerships, healthy opportunities, healthy environments. What do they often have in common? Strong self-respect. Because self-respect acts like a filter. It helps you recognize what belongs in your life and what does not. Without self-respect, people often accept whatever comes, whatever treatment, whatever behavior, whatever standard. With self-respect, choices become clearer. The question is no longer, will they accept me? The question becomes, is this healthy for me? That shift changes everything, because it moves your focus from approval to alignment, from desperation to discernment, from fear to wisdom. Self-respect also changes how you handle criticism. Without self-respect, criticism feels devastating. Every negative opinion becomes a threat. Every rejection feels personal. Every disagreement feels like an attack. But with self-respect, criticism becomes information. Sometimes useful, sometimes useless, but never powerful enough to define your identity. Because your identity is rooted internally, not externally. You know who you are. You know your values. You know your intentions. You know your worth. And that knowledge creates stability. A stability rude people struggle to shake. This is why self-respect is one of the greatest defenses against disrespect. Rude people often search for insecurity, search for weakness, search for emotional dependence, search for fear. But self-respect removes much of their leverage, because people who respect themselves are difficult to manipulate, difficult to intimidate, difficult to control. Not because they are aggressive, but because they are grounded in their value, grounded in their standards, grounded in their identity. And grounded people are difficult to move. Another important truth is this: self-respect requires sacrifice. Sometimes you must sacrifice approval. Sometimes you must sacrifice comfort. Sometimes you must sacrifice convenience. Sometimes you must sacrifice unhealthy relationships. Not because you enjoy losing things, but because protecting your dignity often requires difficult decisions. Every meaningful form of growth requires sacrifice, and self-respect is no exception. There will be moments when standing up for yourself feels uncomfortable, moments when enforcing boundaries feels difficult, moments when walking away feels painful. Do it anyway, because temporary discomfort is often the price of long-term peace, and long-term peace is worth protecting. As you continue this journey, remember that self-respect is not perfection. You will make mistakes, you will have weak moments, you will sometimes fall short of your standards. That is part of being human. The goal is not perfection. The goal is consistency. The goal is progress. The goal is continuing to choose yourself even after setbacks, continuing to honor your values, continuing to protect your dignity, continuing to build trust with yourself. Because every day you practice self-respect, you become stronger. Every day you honor your standards, you become more confident. Every day you refuse to tolerate what destroys your peace, you become more resilient. And eventually something remarkable happens. You stop chasing respect. You stop begging for validation. You stop seeking permission to feel valuable. Because the respect you were searching for begins growing inside you. And once it grows inside you, it becomes visible to everyone around you. Key lesson: the way you treat yourself teaches others how to treat you. If you honor your boundaries, others learn to honor them. If you value your peace, others learn its importance. If you protect your dignity, others recognize your standards. Respect begins within, and when self-respect becomes unbreakable, rude people lose their ability to define your worth. Chapter 10. Become the person people think twice about disrespecting. There comes a point in every person's journey where the goal changes. At first, the goal is to stop being hurt, to stop being disrespected, to stop being taken advantage of, to stop feeling powerless. But eventually a deeper goal emerges. The goal is no longer simply defending yourself from rude people. The goal becomes transforming yourself into someone whose presence naturally commands respect. Someone people think twice about disrespecting, not because they are feared, not because they are intimidating, not because they are aggressive, but because they possess something powerful: inner strength. And inner strength changes everything. Many people spend their lives trying to appear strong. They focus on image, appearance, status, possessions, recognition. But true strength is not something you wear, it is something you become. And the strongest people are often the least interested in proving their strength. Because genuine strength does not need constant validation. It simply exists. One of the greatest forms of strength is strength without arrogance. This balance is rare. Many people become strong and then become proud. They become confident and then become arrogant. They develop boundaries and then become harsh. They learn self-respect and then begin looking down on others. But true strength does not require superiority. A mountain does not need to announce its height. The ocean does not need to brag about its depth. Their power is obvious. Likewise, truly strong people do not need to constantly remind others of their value. They know who they are, and because they know who they are, they remain humble. Humility is often misunderstood. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. Humility is thinking of yourself accurately. It is recognizing your strengths without exaggeration, recognizing your weaknesses without shame, recognizing your value without arrogance. The strongest people understand this. They do not need to dominate conversations. They do not need to win every argument. They do not need to prove they are the smartest person in the room. Their confidence is secure, and secure people are difficult to disrespect. Another quality that commands respect is kindness without weakness. Many people struggle with this balance. Some become kind but lose themselves. Others become strong but lose their compassion. The goal is neither. The goal is both. Kindness and strength, compassion and boundaries, love and self-respect. The world often presents a false choice. Either be kind or be strong. Either be gentle or be respected. Either be compassionate or be powerful. But this is not true. The most respected people often possess both qualities. They are kind because they choose to be, not because they are afraid, not because they are weak, not because they lack options. Their kindness comes from strength, and because it comes from strength, it carries weight. A weak person cannot truly choose kindness. They may simply be avoiding conflict. But a strong person who chooses kindness demonstrates mastery. Mastery over ego, mastery over anger, mastery over pride. That kind of kindness commands respect. Another quality of highly respected people is confidence without pride. Confidence says, I know my value. Pride says, I am better than you. Confidence says, I can handle this. Pride says, I do not need anyone. Confidence is healthy. Pride is dangerous. Confidence creates connection. Pride creates isolation. The goal is not to become prideful. The goal is to become secure. Secure enough to acknowledge your strengths. Secure enough to admit your mistakes. Secure enough to learn. Secure enough to grow. Secure enough to remain teachable. The most respected people never stop learning. They never believe they have arrived. They remain curious. They remain humble. They remain open to wisdom. And wisdom is another quality that causes people to think twice before disrespecting you. Wisdom without fear. Many people know what is right but lack the courage to act. They know they should set boundaries, but fear stops them. They know they should speak up, but fear stops them. They know they should walk away, but fear stops them. Wisdom becomes powerful when it is paired with courage. Courage transforms knowledge into action. Courage transforms understanding into change. Courage transforms principles into reality. A wise person understands when to speak and when to remain silent, when to stay and when to leave, when to fight and when to walk away, when to forgive and when to create distance. This wisdom creates stability, and stable people are difficult to manipulate, difficult to intimidate, difficult to control, because their decisions are not driven by fear. They are driven by values. They are driven by principles. They are driven by purpose. One of the greatest transformations that can happen in your life is learning to live from a position of value. Most people live from a position of lack. They fear rejection, fear abandonment, fear criticism, fear disapproval, fear being alone. And because they live from fear, they tolerate things they should never tolerate. They settle for less than they deserve. They remain in unhealthy situations. They compromise their dignity. They sacrifice their peace, all because they believe they have no other choice. But people who understand their value think differently. They understand that their worth does not come from external approval. They understand that respect begins within. They understand that they bring value wherever they go. And because they understand their value, they stop chasing validation. They stop begging for acceptance. They stop proving themselves to people committed to misunderstanding them. Instead, they focus on becoming better, growing stronger, growing wiser, growing more disciplined, growing more peaceful. This shift changes everything, because when you know your value, your decisions improve, your boundaries improve, your relationships improve, your confidence improves, and the way people treat you often improves as well. Not because you demanded respect, but because your self-respect became visible. People can sense when someone values themselves. They can sense when someone is comfortable in their own skin. They can sense when someone has standards. They can sense when someone refuses to tolerate disrespect. And that awareness influences how they behave. The truth is that rude people often target those they believe will tolerate their behavior. But when they encounter someone grounded in self-respect, emotionally mature, and confident, the dynamic changes. The opportunities for manipulation disappear. The opportunities for control disappear. the opportunities for intimidation disappear, because strength is present. Quiet strength, steady strength, unshakable strength. This does not mean you will never encounter rude people again. You will. It does not mean everyone will respect you. They won't. It does not mean criticism disappears. It doesn't. But it does mean something important. You will no longer be controlled by those things. You will no longer allow rude people to define your worth. You will no longer allow criticism to destroy your confidence. You will no longer allow disrespect to determine your identity, because your identity will be rooted in something deeper, something stronger, something permanent, self-respect. And once self-respect becomes your foundation, life changes. You stop reacting to every insult. You stop chasing every opinion. You stop fighting every battle. You stop seeking validation from people who cannot provide it. Instead, you walk with confidence, speak with clarity, set healthy boundaries, protect your peace, honor your values, and continue moving forward. That is the person people think twice about disrespecting. Not the loudest person, not the most aggressive person, not the most intimidating person, but the person who knows who they are, the person who respects themselves, the person who remains calm under pressure, the person who refuses to abandon their dignity, the person whose strength comes from within. Because in the end, the most respected people are not those who control others. They are those who have learned to control themselves. Key lesson. The most respected people are not the loudest. They are the strongest within. When strength is combined with humility, confidence is combined with wisdom, and kindness is combined with healthy boundaries, respect becomes a natural consequence. Become that person, and rude people will lose their power to define your worth.